What is up, everybody? My name is Kyle Matovcik. I am the host of the In Liberty and Health podcast, where we talk all things liberty, health, and wellness, and beyond. My hope is to encourage and spread the message of liberty and physical and mental well-being. I hope you enjoy all the topics we talk about with our guests. We're on all major streaming platforms, so please sit back, relax, and enjoy.
Man, I'm doing as good as anyone can do getting buried by his 13-year-old son on leg day.
I'm not going to apologize for not being on this podcast because I got to go see Metallica. So if that's a problem, kiss my ass. Okay?
I am.
All right.
All right, everybody. I got a little roundtable here today. We're going to be discussing the LP versus the paleo-libertarian or GOP route, which, you know, maybe those aren't exactly interchangeable, but we're just going to kind of see where this goes. And I've been looking forward to having this conversation for quite a while because the strategy thing really interests me. As the government gets more and more out of control, and as we see more and more of this ridiculous shit being pushed on us, the strategy question seems to be more and more prevalent and very, very important. And we should definitely allocate resources to the best place possible. So I guess everybody give a quick introduction. Buck, since last time you were on, you kind of got to go last. I'll let you go first, and then we'll do Tyler and Pete, or Taylor and Pete. And
all good.
Just give a little introduction of where you were, because all you guys at one point, I believe, were sort of involved with the LP and then kind of moved on to where you're at now. So, Buck, go ahead, start things off.
Okay, I'll start by saying if I'm not my usual chipper, amazingly happy, funny self, I'm a slight bit hungover. Thanks, Mark, Claire. We were up till about 3 a.m. drinking whiskey. So
I'm jealous.
Yeah, it was good. But it hurts a little bit right now. Let's see. Yeah, I was in the LP in 2000-ish. 2000 till about 2016 or something like that. Maybe a little past that. And I also was by the way, a quick aside, I was a Republican delegate for Ron Paul in 2008. So, but I think I was still in the LP when that all went down. I was wide-eyed when I first joined it, and I thought, what a cool thing this is. And it was in Austin, Texas. And I started going to the meetings. There's only like 10 of us, but I thought like, well, I'm kind of being an activist and all this stuff. And this is important to me. And of course, during the Bush years, you don't want to be Republican. And I certainly wasn't going to be a Democrat. And so that was kind of the only option I felt for political activity. And then I quit kind of going to the meetings and stuff like that over the years. I was in my 20s, so I was focused, interestingly enough, on other activities besides political ones. And then I started going because of people like my pal Pete and Scott Horton and Dave Smith and Tom. I started going, I guess I was in like 2015 or something, to be possibly a delegate for Jacob Hornberger. And so I was attending the meetings again. And was that 2020? Oh shit. Okay. Never mind. Yeah. Well, that was 2020.
Feels like it's been that long.
It does. And lo and behold, I looked around, and other than a handful crop of new people that some I'm still friends with, it was like the same old guys and gals from 2002, 2003, 2004, still like, hey, who's going to run for commissioner and all of this stupid shit. And after the Hornberger thing kind of fizzled out, and I was kind of done at that point. And I really didn't have any more interest in being in a political party at all. So even though we're talking GOP route versus LP route, or whatever we want to frame this as, I'm not a GOP person either. I'm not a political party person. And I think local activism, I don't like that word, it's a progressive term, but local political activity is probably more important than national political activity. And I don't know that a political party is even necessary, at least for what I'm interested in. So I know that was a long rant, but I have no interest in any political party, certainly one that has no value to me, which is the Libertarian Party. Certainly not the Democratic Party either, but more and more those are the same thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. As we see, we were talking a little bit off air, but here in Pennsylvania, there definitely is a lot of, I'm just going to come straight out and say it, but degeneracy amongst some of the libertarians here in the party. And I've been very, very torn about this whole debate, specifically because the longer you spend with libertarians, the more signal chats you get into, the more you realize that someone like me, a blue collar dude who, wants to be married and wants to have kids, well, is going to be married and is going to have kids, and owns his house at 27 years old. A lot of these people don't share exactly the same values as me, and ending the drug war and promoting sex work is at number one on my list of priorities. But for some people it is, and I mean, that's okay. But if we're going to be using a political party, then I think we need to figure out what those priorities are. And once again, to me, that's not sex work and drug laws. And not to say that those aren't important at all, but they're very, very low on my list of priorities. Taylor, you want to go ahead and give a little introduction and whole deal on where you're at as well?
Okay. Yeah. When I was, let's see, about to turn 16 years old, I started paying attention to politics. It was because of the Ron Paul 2008 campaign where this all started. And then in between those years, in between 2008 and 2012, I was in high school, like Buck was discussing his 20s, was definitely, while I cared about politics and was interested in it, it was not that big in my list of priorities. I cared about, baseball and whatever else. And then in 2012, I was not able to register yet because I was actually 17. But the 2012 Ron Paul campaign really got me interested in politics completely, like where I became as, I wouldn't say obsessive as I am now, especially on the theory end, but very, very passionate about the subject, even if my knowledge wasn't there yet. And as soon as I could have, I registered for the LP because of what the GOP did to Ron Paul in 2012. And I thought, you know what, Ron ran as a GOP candidate, but he represents these ideas, and this party is supposed to represent those ideas. And then I got more into theory, Rothbard mostly, and 2016 rolls around, and thinking that the LP was going to be a good route for some form of like the start to my real political life, where I could advocate for candidates. When I started to really pay attention to the LP, I quickly realized this was a lost cause, 1000%. And after 2016, when Trump got elected, I could not. I switched back to GOP so fast my head spun. And then the Mises Caucus thing came around. I went to a meeting or two, talked to Heiss, very good guy, nice guy. Switched back to LP just out of being like, I would say, just like, okay, these are really good guys. I should give this a shot again. And again, really, I once I like got home from those meetings and thought about it again and talked to Jared and the rest of the hoppyin.org guys and everything else, I was just like, I don't really think this is going to work. I mean, I like these people because they agree with me on theory. At least the Mises Caucus guys, a few of them, I guess. But if I really want to change anything and actually do something, especially locally, and like Buck said, localism is where it's at. And while I may disagree with him that no political party is one that he cares about in that situation, while I have very, very big sympathies for the GOP, even the PA GOP, which is just fraught with some of the worst in the conservative camp, but also some very good people. And after that 2020 LP registration or whatever year that was, I switched right back to GOP, and I'm here. And even I considered myself Paleo, whenever I registered back LP, I wasn't a true believer. So I came back home to the GOP. I don't even really count that LP round 2 as a real LP round for me, because it was literally less than 2 months. But yeah, and I'm here, and really strong believer in the new right as a movement for libertarians to help the right to get the country back to where it goes. I don't need the right to conform to my ideas. I want to help the right with my ideas. And that's where I am.
Cool. Yeah, there's a lot I want to touch on there, but Pete, you're perhaps the most interesting case in this whole deal.
Interesting usually means asshole.
Well, I don't mean that in this context, just so we're clear. Because you had started doing speaking events, and don't take this as a dig at you, and I know you said it's asshole, but you don't come off as the kind of public speaking kind of guy. Just
really?
For
I'm
me,
actually really good at it.
Okay, well, I believe it, because I do think you're very eloquent in that kind of way. But like, you just, I don't know, like I don't know, it just doesn't, not my initial expectation. But anyways, you were doing speaking stuff for the LP and
Mises Caucus, not the LP.
Right. Well, okay, yeah, LP Mises Caucus. I guess that's definitely a good denominator. But then you had seemed to become disaffected with that and kind of moved on to the whole post-libertarian moment, which I feel like is almost a misnomer in a way, but at the same time, it also kind of indicates something important, right? Because it's a moment where you realize that just libertarianism alone and posting taxation to theft memes and screaming the non-aggression principle doesn't actually get us to Ancapistan. So if you could kind of detail out your journey, because you were originally brought in from Ron Paul, and then LP, and then now you're at where you're at. So just kind of detail out that journey, and obviously what you're doing now.
So I voted 3 times in my life, and every time I voted for a Republican. But I only ever voted for a right winger once, and that was when I voted for Ron Paul in 2008. Turns out the other 2 were one was a CIA agent, and the other one was a owned by the neocons. So by the time 2012 rolled around, I mean, I was out. I didn't even follow the campaign. I wasn't following anything. I mean, I was like meditating. I was like doing spiritual work and stuff like that. 2016 rolled around. I just saw this absolute circus start happening. Really didn't know, when you looked at it, you're like, okay, so if Trump wins, what does the country look like? If Hillary wins, you pretty much know what the country's going to look like. So I decided to just get involved and get on social media. I mean, I was actually making memes instead of stealing them back then, and and posting and things like that. And then I got involved. I started the podcast in July 2017, and it took a little while to get popular, but to start getting some downloads. But it started happening, and I remember when the Mises Caucus thing first started, when I first heard about it, was late 2017. And I thought it was, a really good idea, because they were invoking the Mises Institute, which from day one of 2007, I was interested in. I was ordering books from, I was donating to. And I thought that the Mises Caucus sounded like a good idea. And my whole goal was just to promote it. Didn't want to get involved at all. I didn't want to go to conventions or anything like that. And let me just promote it. And 2020 rolled around. It was convention season, and I went to the January convention in 2020. And it's January 2020. It's right about to happen very soon afterwards. And I mean, I hated every minute of it. By the second day, I snuck out to buy a bottle of Jack Daniels, and they couldn't even get a quorum because I had left to go to the liquor store. So I get back. By the time we leave there, I'm hammered, and I'm just like, I don't want to do this. I don't want to do this. Well, COVID pretty much took care of that, and I just completely dropped out. I didn't have any opinions on yeah, I wasn't making any opinions on the LP or the Mises Caucus at that point. I mean, I was just like, this is probably the most important thing that's going to happen in my life, this COVID thing. And I recognized it right away. So I started talking about it. At the end of the year, I got contacted by someone, said, hey, this is what the plan is. Do you want to be involved? And it's like, sure, I get to hang out with my friends. I get to, you know, basically I'm around people that I like. And I started promoting it, started really running with it and everything. And went to speak at a convention in Washington. And when I came back, it was like PorcFest was soon after that, and I went to PorcFest. And when I got back from PorcFest, I got COVID bad. And I don't know, just the whole time that I was laying in bed and thinking about it, I was just like, I was rethinking a lot of things. And I was just like, okay, so what is the strategy here? And obviously the strategy is not to get elected and wield power, because you're trying to take over the LP. So then the only strategy left is teaching, is you use it as a teaching method. And then I started going over some old Ron Paul writings and found one from 1972 where he's addressing David Nolan straight on, saying that a third party will never be a teaching platform. And he invoked the Socialist Workers' Party, which had existed for 100 years at that point, ran someone every 4 years, and just basically turned people off. And then he pointed out that, look at the LP, you know, then later on, like 20 years later, I'm reading more articles about the LP, and Murray's like, it's a freak show. It's like the nation's biggest outpatient clinic. And even if you go now, it's there. I don't care about a takeover. I don't care about, you know, so if I don't believe that, if I think that you need political power in order to have change, and nobody's looking at the kind of political power that I think it takes to take change, well, that goes off the table there. And then I don't believe that it's an educational vehicle anymore. Well, then why would I waste my time? I mean, it was like, and you know, I don't want to. They could send me to talk to places, you know, talk in places. It's not going to be in my heart. I'm not going to just waste their money and everything like that. You know, if I want to travel, I'll just travel. But it just got to the point where I'm like, okay, if we want change in the direction that we're going in, that we want to go in, it's going to desire an insane amount of power, and it's going to, and when you tell most libertarians that, they say things like, you just want power so you can punish your enemies. So I start reading political theory, and what does political theory say? Well, you know, most people who get in power, they reward their friends and punish their enemies. Like, that sounds like what politics is. And if you're not willing to accept that, then you're probably just stay out of the game. And I'm okay with people staying out of the game, but shut the fuck up about me getting involved with it and doing what needs to be done. You know, I'm just sick of the bullshit of, you know, wishing, here, read this book, you know, watch this video, and hoping that you're going to change the world. Well, you're not going to change the world. And let me tell you something. If you have in your head a picture of what you think the world is going to look like, what will improve human flourishing, will make people more free, and you're not willing to seize the power in order to do it and to implement it, you're immoral and you're evil. What are you doing? Just quit. Stop talking about it.
Right. Yeah. And you kind of came at me before, and reasonably so. And I think it was necessary. And this is what really kind of got my head scratching. The LP here in Pennsylvania, as I'm sure you've heard, we've won contested and obviously a lot of uncontested races. Mm-hmm. And I've said on this podcast plenty of times, look, we elected you so that way you can help bring about liberty and freedom for the people that you're responsible for, right? The people who elected you. If you do not do that, I will be the first one to say, okay, you're out. If it's a Republican, if it's a Democrat, if it's another Libertarian, whoever is going to take your place and do the things that need to be done, will be put in there, and I will actively make sure you're out of there. And I think that's the way that we need to look at it. So that being said, you guys are all about local politics, and Pennsylvania seems to be a good ground for this. What would change your mind about the LP approach? And once again, I want full and honest criticism, because I'm looking for the objective truth of things, right? I want to know what's going to work. I don't care about a party, right? If the Libertarian Party here in Pennsylvania fails, then okay, we're done. 2024, if this is still the same thing, oh, look, we have all these people, dog catchers and, constables and auditors of election, then okay, what did we do? Who's better off? Buck, you want to start off with that?
You say, I want to ask you, what would it take to back the LP strategy, or what is the strategy?
Basically run people locally to use political power to help free people, right? I mean, that's my interpretation of that. Maybe I'm wrong, but that's
I've actually talked to Heiss about this before. He as the leader of the Mises Caucus was actually very, very influenced. And I mean, the Mises Caucus was built on what must be done by Hoppe. At least the intention was to mirror his strategy. And while I absolutely love that idea, you must be willing to acknowledge the barriers to entry that the LP brings to that. Absolutely. And also the baggage that the LP brings with you, which while the GOP, sure, I mean, it has its issues, many of them, at least it has the potential to make that change with people who don't even agree with you, 40% voting for you. LP people, they get spite votes and they get full agreement votes. GOP votes get people who just like voting GOP. I mean, and that's it. And you can earn more. You can turn people. But yeah, Buck, go. I interrupted you. I apologize for that.
No worries. You actually also made a good point earlier. I want to retract what I said, that I don't need a political party to do local stuff. Sure. I was of that mind, but Taylor actually reminded me I had a Zoom meeting with well, I don't know if it was supposed to be private anyway, but it's someone we all know. And I do need a little bit of a political party locally, not to say I'm Buck Johnson as the Republican of Lockhart, Texas, or something like that. But I am going to approach the local GOP and discuss certain things with them, because I obviously would like them at least in my corner, if not to offer, treasurer and stuff like that. So I would say that. What would it take for me to get behind the LP strategy, if that's what the strategy is? To be honest, it would have to be that the LP was a major party player, and they're not. And they're not, as far as I could tell, things change year to year. At this rate, things change month to month and day to day. Yeah. I would bet my house that they'll never be a major player. And so there's no real point. If you're going to run for office or support someone that's running for office, if the idea is not to win, then I am a little bit lost as to what the purpose would be. You can educate people, and you can be on talk shows and TV shows and write books and pass books out, not as a politician. Mm-hmm. And so, especially these days, I mean, Dave Smith's a comedian, and he's probably one of the best voices for this type of stuff we're talking about. And he doesn't need to be a politician to do that. He's all over the place. Same with Tom Woods. If Tom wanted to be out there as much as Dave is, I suspect that he could. I wouldn't think that Tom should go run for the Libertarian Party presidential candidate or something like that. It would be pointless. And so it's just the whole, as if I were a leftist, I would think that the Green Party is equally impotent. Like it's just kind of purposeless, other than saying like, I'm some kind of fringe activist, but you're not going to get anywhere just rah, 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 and yelling at stuff and screaming at the wall and trying to change the hearts and minds, to lose. I mean, that's not a very convincing message. Hey, we're so pure and we have the best message and we're going to lose. Come join us. It doesn't make any sense to me. It's just weird.
Yeah. So I completely agree. And this is I catch a lot of flack for it, but I say, where there's viable Republican candidates, someone like Ian Smith over in New Jersey, I had him on the show and he's running for Congress. Why the fuck would someone in the LP run against him? Who are you going to bring to the table who's going to bring in more votes and is more admired than he is, right? This dude's been on Tucker Carlson a number of times. He's very, very well known, and obviously he's loved by his community. It's like a Ron Paul situation, somebody who birthed a whole ton of people and who's loved by his community is running for Congress. Do you think there's anybody in the LP who has even remotely the same notoriety that he does to run against him and actually win?
Well, no, but there's going to be someone that runs against him in the LP, I bet you.
Yeah, and I said actively we shouldn't do that. Sorry, Taylor.
It's all good.
Yeah. So I see you have something to say, but I guess after that, just kind of go into what it would potentially take to change your mind. So go ahead. I see you're chomping at the bit.
Oh yeah. Well, literally what I was going to say was, if you want me to stop actively speaking against the LP, stop running against right-wingers, real right-wingers, run against neocons, run against bad right-wingers, stop running against good ones. And like I said, stop trying to be the smartest people in the room whenever it comes to, you don't conform to my ideology 100%. So you don't have my support. This is politics. This is not like a club. There's real shit at stake. So whenever people in the LP talk about like a Dave Smith won't endorse a Joe Jorgensen, and like he didn't vote for Trump, but what if he said that he would, just because Trump was maybe better than Biden, but by his choice, people in the LP would be trying to actively kick him out because he felt that real power and real consequences were at stake here, as we are seeing now. And if he said, hey, I'm still an ANCAP, I'm still 100% a libertarian, as am I, more libertarian than I ever have been. But if he would have used his voice to say, hey, I think I'm going to vote for Trump, just defensively, pure 90s Rothbard, paleo, like, we're voting for these people defensively, but also because they don't hate our guts and we could probably work with them. But that would be the way to change my mind on the LP as a party as a whole. Stop running against good right-wingers. Work with them. The reason why right-wingers hate libertarians half the time, like even good right-wingers hate libertarians half the time, is because A, they don't know real libertarians, and B, it's because libertarians are constantly screeching at them that they're fascists. Work with them. Stop running people against them, because they're more on your side than half the LP.
Yeah, so maybe this is where, maybe I'm not the best person to defend the LP, because this has kind of been my thing all along, is that, hey, if there's actually a good, viable Republican, you really shouldn't run against them, because it's in our best interest to make sure that good Republicans get elected. And as far as I can tell,
welcome to paleo.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think it's that hard of a concept to get. And once again, to bring it back to someone like Ian Smith, who are you going to run against that's going to be as influential as him? Taylor, I think when you and I were going back and forth on Twitter, Aaron Bernstein got brought up, and I'm actually working on getting him on the show and going to talk to him about some different stuff. But, once again, if he proves to me that, if there's an LP candidate running in his county, but, if I like him more and he seems more viable, then, sorry, I'll vote Republican. It shouldn't be about the party. It should be about the principles and the person who's going to wield power most effectively and is most likely to get in. It shouldn't be a vanity game. And that's kind of my thinking all along. And I think a lot of people just want to run as a libertarian for their own ego, and just to say that, look, I'm an LP candidate, because I see this all the time. I'm elected libertarian. Okay, that's
big
fine.
Fish, small pond.
Right. But yeah. What have you done? So anyways, kind of a long side tangent, but Pete, what would it take for you to change your mind? I don't think you're going to. I'm not asking anybody to, but I'm just kind of curious, what you guys' thoughts would be surrounding potentially change your mind.
Well, something that would give me hope, and Taylor already brought up the term fascist, so let me bring out that side of me. Um, I'm looking at the LP website right now, and it says member pledge. Yes, sign me up as a member. To validate my membership, I certify that I oppose the initiation of force to achieve political or social goals. If you are not willing to use force, which is not violence, to achieve political goals, you're done. You're out of the game. Politics is all about force. It's all about applying pressure. And if that's against, I would even go as far as social goals, because, then I'll start thinking about, oh, what if you do get to Ancapistan? And what if you do have a covenant community? And what if somebody is preaching communism? Well, then you are going to be, as the Hoppe meme goes, physically removed if you don't change your ways, and you won't. They don't change your ways, very rarely. That's my biggest problem. My biggest problem is that you cannot, I've been writing about this since the ending of 2020. You cannot have the non-aggression principle be applied to politics. Forget it. You're done. It's over.
Well, yeah, I might disagree with Pete here. I go back and forth on it all the time. I don't think that force is aggression inherently. Yeah. So I still, like I said, I'm still as much of a libertarian, still as much of an ANCAP, still as much of a Rothbardian, Hoppian, whatever you want to call me. As ever, I never advocate for breaking the NAP, but where people get confused is they use the agorist definition of libertarianism, or their idea of libertarianism, which is left libertarianism, to say that all political action is aggression. I disagree wholeheartedly. And defensively using political means against your enemies, which could involve violence, just defensive violence, is not aggression. That's defense. Physical removal of people who are actively advocating against private property norms in a covenant community. I mean, if they're in the streets breaking windows saying, hey, we gotta crush this system, we need equality, and you say, hey, get the fuck out of here, and you get somebody to kick them out, that's not aggression, that's defense. I have never ever advocated for aggression, but I will absolutely advocate for force.
Okay, so I'm glad you guys are on this topic, because it made me think of a tweet I put out the other day, and I did catch some flack from a specific libertarian, and I tweeted out, there's a difference between authoritarianism and leveraging local politics to advance freedom. You can reduce government burden without being a tyrant. If you're an anarchist against local political action, you're absolutely useless in effect. And there were a handful of libertarians who came right at me saying, oh, I wouldn't say that. What about agorism? And this is kind of like, yeah, this is kind of like those assholes who say Bitcoin fixes this to absolutely fucking everything. Well, look, not everybody is going to fucking adopt Bitcoin. Not everybody's going to adopt agorism. I heard Pete say this on one of the End of the Empires, and I think about it all the time, but these anarchists and a lot of libertarians will say we need to do everything we can to delegitimize the state so that way people drop out. Well, not everybody's going to drop out. It's just not going to happen. So
it's like homeschooling.
Right.
It's what I've been talking about homeschooling lately. Yeah, homeschool your frigging kids, but understand 95% of everybody else is not going to homeschool their kids. So in 20 years, when you have the greatest kid, when you've raised the greatest kid, all these kids the same age are progressive soldiers who probably, if it's a female, want to force top surgery upon her.
And they absolutely hate your kid as well. And they will do everything to ostracize them.
Oh, 100%. And I had this argument on, what was it? Punk Rock Libertarians. One of the first shows I ever went on, and I made the point, almost the same point as Pete is making. I think just the same point, but a different way of saying it, where I was like, while public schools exist, I obviously advocate for as many people to be homeschooled as possible, but to say that I want public schools to be as unpleasant and violence-ridden place as they are right now would be awful for me to say. There are children involved. And like, yeah, they're obviously like, they're tools to churn out ideological progressives, 100%. But you can change that to a point, but you can also make them safer for people that are involved. And if you go around preaching end public schools because public schools are so bad, a lot of parents, they're not going to take you seriously. And this is I was blown away with the guy that was arguing with me saying, I don't care. They should homeschool their kids. And I was like, yeah, I mean, I kind of figured you would say that. I'm not going to mention the dude by name, but fuck him.
Once again, sounds a lot like Bitcoin fixes this. When someone tells you I can't fix my car,
I have more sympathy for the Bitcoin people than these people. To say that we should make things as unpleasant as possible just because of a government monopoly on that situation is insane, and will get you nothing but vitriol against you from the majority of the public. You think they hate you now? Wait until they hear your modal libertarian garbage, non-political realist position on why their kids should be suffering because you won't homeschool them and you have to work 2 jobs because the state and the Federal Reserve inflated the money so much that you need to work 2 jobs.
Right. Yeah, and that is the honest truth of it. And this kind of goes back to a weakness with the LP right now. You're seeing them with this "Don't Say Gay" bill, right? And they're freaking out saying, oh, the government should have, should just abolish public schools, and, it shouldn't matter what you're teaching. It's so silly that you can't advocate for better policy. And so many libertarians want to be perfect on every issue rather than just saying like, okay, well, this is my preference, but without saying, okay, we should abolish public schools, but right now, why don't we try to soften the blow and make things as good as possible? And if that means voting for Republicans or, advocating for certain policies, then why can't we do that? Why does it have to be, I'm not going to engage in any of this. It's just, let's just try to abolish it. Well, once again, it's just not going to happen.
Yeah, I mean, it's just the ideological purity. And a lot of people, their libertarianism, their anarcho-capitalism, their especially their agorism, it becomes their identity.
Mm-hmm.
And if they deviate 1 inch from it, all their fellow people are going to be all over them. Believe me, I know this. I know that. I don't talk about anarchy anymore, and I have a documentary on Amazon Prime about anarchy, shot mostly at the Mises Institute. I just don't talk about it anymore because I want to talk about solutions that are to what's happening now. I mean, we're not going to have anarcho-capitalism in my lifetime, not on any grand scale. I mean, and it's going to take a lot of work to do it locally. So we need to start talking about what needs to be done now and stop worrying about what people online who you've never met in your life, who would not, who wouldn't piss on you if you were on fire. They just, because you throw some fire memes up there every once in a while, they're really nice to you and everything. Stop caring what they think. I got attacked by Adam Kokesh this week. I got attacked by somebody else about how I'm not a libertarian anymore. And I'm like, yeah, I know that. I mean, it's like, I know that my prescription isn't perfect libertarianism, but you're not going to have perfect libertarianism. It's like, I'm behind everything DeSantis is doing down there because he's operating like a king. He's basically like, operating via fiat. And that's pretty much what you have to do in a bureaucracy as such. And if that black gay crackhead would have got elected instead of him, that state would be destroyed right now, because that state is about tourism. It runs on tourism. and he would have shut down the whole tourism industry. That place would have been probably, the Rat probably would have survived because they would have paid him to stay open or something like that. I don't know, or would have gotten money or something. But and the Rat has, billions. But DeSantis saved that state. I don't care, I do care that he's a Zionist. I wish he wasn't a Zionist, but I'm willing to look past that because I have people that I love that live in that state and they are thriving because of him.
Fuck, you got anything to add?
I was just thinking as these guys are talking, one of the issues with running under the banner of the Libertarian Party, and obviously, and Pete's alluded to this, and I'll just say it's my opinion. Overall, there's not a wide pool of charisma and talent within the LP. However, there is some, and it's funny because Libertarians typically will understand economics well, but you are allocating resources in an extremely inefficient manner if you're putting talented, charismatic, smart people and running them as a libertarian. What a waste of resources, when it would be nice if I don't know if say someone like Angela McArdle was taking over, I don't know, maybe the Democratic Party of Orange County, or I'm not specific on where she lives, but imagine someone bright like her representing an agency with power, an organization with power. Imagine Dave Smith running to be a Republican senator of New Jersey or something like that, or House, representative. How cool would that be? I just spoke with this guy today for my next episode. Bruce Fenton is up in New Hampshire. Yep. And guy is really bright. He's a Ron Paul disciple of sorts, and a Bitcoin guy, and he's funding a lot of his campaign in that manner. But he's running for the U.S. Senate and has a shot at least to win his primary as a Republican. How cool would it be to have that guy in the Senate? And so, if you've got a bright, charismatic, smart person, I just feel like you're wasting a valuable talent in some kind of dumpster fire, far off that no one looks at.
Right. You guys want to add anything else to that?
Really, if I had one wish, it would be that the best of the LP were as politically realist as what Buck just said. Dave Smith in the GOP is an unstoppable force. Angela McArdle in the California Democratic Party, like he said, is an unstoppable force. I'm not even really aware of the nitty-gritty of her positions. I know she's better than most of the LP. Yeah. And I know that her as a female and also somebody who knows how to appeal to the left would crush it. But this LP, I'm a libertarian, so I have to work within the LP just because of something that I owe to the philosophy. It's quite the opposite. You owe the philosophy to get out of the LP and make a real difference somewhere. It doesn't matter where it is.
It's that identity thing again. It's that identity. Why would I go in the GOP with blood-soaked monsters? And it's an excuse. You don't want to. I'm just convinced these people don't want to succeed.
No,
they don't want to succeed. They just 100%. Yeah, it's like
they're
they
scared.
know as long as yeah. Even Kokesh, I quoted him. He had a tweet yesterday where he said, anyone who runs as a libertarian knows they're not going to win. And I retweeted it, and all I put was, okay, ask the logical question.
Yeah.
Yeah. So kind of tailing on to there, I really liked Trump the first 2 years, but I wasn't as politically informed as I am now. And I've had a lot of back and forth with Tho and obviously you guys. And it does seem like the fallout from Trump has brought out a lot of good in the GOP. While I don't believe he himself was necessarily a beacon for good, the outcome of him and the influence he brought and the people that he brought were a very, 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 very big net positive for the GOP, because you have guys like Sabatini, and I disagree with some of these guys on some shit, but look at the bigger picture, right? Yes, you could say they're bloodsuck monsters. Yes, you could say Trump should spend the rest of his life in prison for failing to end the genocide in Yemen. Yes, you could say they're still poor on foreign policy. But yes, your federal politics is a crapshoot. But once again, bigger picture, you have DeSantis, right? He's a Zionist neocon. Okay, but it's very, very important to note that this dude loves his people. He will do anything to protect Floridians, right? As he did. Don't agree with him on everything, but I would definitely say that here in Pennsylvania, Taylor can attest. I would have rather been in Florida for the last 2 years than here in Pennsylvania.
You
right?
are goddamn right, dude.
Right. And once again, you got Sabatini, Marjorie Taylor Greene, who may seem like a kook, but if you just listen to her for more than 5 minutes, like, she actually makes a lot of fucking sense. And I've had her, the person running against her on my show, and kind of looking back at it now, I'm like, she's kind of ridiculous, because she's literally saying she might be a Russian asset. And
Oh God.
Was that an LP person?
Yes. The person who's running against,
And the only reason she seems like
left libertarian.
the only reason she seems like a kook is because of the way she's framed in the national spotlight. She doesn't seem like
and I didn't know anything about her until I listened to her on Tim Pool. And after that, I was fully convinced, like, okay, well, I think Angela, who's running against her, like, if you really want to be politically active, run for something else. Don't run against her. Marjorie Taylor Greene is an ally to libertarians, and she's proved this time and time again, because she says, hey, Republicans, listen to the libertarians, right? She's been very, very friendly to libertarians. She wants a more, libertarian style Republican Party. Why the fuck are you running against her? Run for Senate, run for city council, just do something. Don't fuck with her. What are you doing? And then once again, the fucking Libertarian Party, what do? They promote the recent article with her running against Marjorie Taylor Greene. Of all people, why don't you, once again, like Taylor was saying earlier, talk about somebody who's, primarying a neocon or a bad right winger. Why not promote that person? Why do you promote the one person who's running against somebody who's actually good on the political right?
As Pete said in the last time I spoke to him, because they hate the right.
Mm-hmm.
They hate the right. Most libertarians view it in the cartoonish lens of the right being evil, the left being stupid. And they took this to heart whenever they were 10 years old, and they never let it go. And they view supporting anybody on the right who maybe has some less than conventional opinions as somebody who is not worth their support. Even if MTG is better on the Fed than 40% of the Libertarian Party, better on interventionist wars than, I would say, at least 10% of the Libertarian Party right now, maybe more.
Ukraine. Think about all the Ukraine flags and some bios.
Yeah, I mean, they hate the right. They really do. And to go back to Trump and what he brought to the Republican Party, himself, yes. And Thodas put out a great article about Trump betraying his base on the Fed, him going back to monetary policy and how bad he was on it. But to quote to quote Lou Rockwell on Buck's show, Trump doesn't deserve to win. The American people don't deserve Trump to lose. And that was right before the election. And that's something that I took to heart whenever I listened to it. I remember exactly where I was whenever I heard that line on Buck's show. I was in my car on the way home from my buddy's house, and I was still going to vote for Trump, but and it was like that reasoning for me, because I was very disappointed in his first term and only term at this point. But really, I mean, that's the political realism that I want from libertarians. I want them to understand that working with the right at this point, right now, not the 2001 right. Lou is hard on the 2001 right as anybody. Go and look at 2001 articles from LouRockwell.com, and you will see that he was harder on the right in America than anybody that he has ever been, any political side he's ever been criticizing. But I mean, the moment that we have right now, while there are still some ugly sides to the right, there is more opportunity now than there has been since 1990. And Rothbard saw it then, and we have to see it now.
Well put.
Yeah.
Now, you guys got anything to add? So kind of while we're talking about right, what does the right mean to you? Because or to each of you guys, because this seems to get pretty sloppy when people start talking about it. And I was very, very on this. Like, I didn't get why people kept saying right wing, right wing, right wing, because I just didn't understand it. And then over time, once I had Mac, Taylor on, you guys more so defined it a little bit more clearly as, to me, what seems to be respect for natural order and hierarchy. When you just boil it down to that, then I agree. And kind of like a side note, when you look at 2017 or like 2019 when Me Too came around, it's kind of funny that we had a white male Republican who is very Machiavellian in his rhetoric, and then you have all these sexual assault allegations coming out against men. Just kind of convenient when that movement had been around for 10 years, right? So Buck, I guess, what does the right mean to you?
Kind of what you just alluded to, basically. I just kind of keep it simple in that you not prefer even, but you would advocate for a natural hierarchy in societies and a natural elite and things like that. And then leftism would be the opposite of that. Leftism, one of the reasons it's evil is because it's impossible to attain. And so that would be egalitarianism. And as some great man put it, to revolt against nature.
Mm-hmm. Cool. Taylor, same deal?
Yeah, I mean, it's the right is natural hierarchy, politically, society of natural elites, and order, and the opposite of egalitarianism and chaos. I take a lot of influence from the NRX guys when applying that definition of the right. Now, in my pure libertarian form of what the right is, it is natural hierarchies and anti-egalitarianism. But what that leads to is the Moldbugian definition of right and left, of order versus chaos. So it's essentially the NRX. It follows the libertarian and real definition of the right.
Cool. Pete?
Yeah, I take the NRX order versus chaos, and you look at the highest crime areas of the country. Those are mostly left. I mean almost all left. When you look at, as I've traveled this country, gone to small towns and seen these places that have zero violent crime and everything. I mean, these are right-wing places. These are places where you see Trump flags. These are places where you see "Let's Go Brandon" flags. When you go to Chicago, when you go to New York, when you go to Camden, New Jersey, when you go to Baltimore, these are the places that are the most violent are the left, and violence is chaos. People don't want. One of the reasons they hate violence is because it's chaotic. They don't know what's coming next. That's a great thing about private property. The great thing about private property is you know what you own, another person knows what they own. It reduces friction. It reduces any kind of violence and any kind of disorder. And to bring up hierarchy too, is hierarchy is really important, and to understand that there are natural hierarchies out there. And leftists, and you could see, man, can you see it now, especially when you look at some of those TikTok videos of teachers and everything. And when you see a lot of libertarians, I mean, I'm not even going to say left libertarians because I don't know. They appear as left libertarians. They may have a Rothbard quote in their profile, but when they start ragging on the family, how the family is not a hierarchy, a natural hierarchy. I look at those people no differently than I look at the people, the kindergarten teacher, the gay male kindergarten teacher who wants to teach your kid about paddleboarding, whatever the fuck that is. I mean, so
yeah. Well, and Taylor, you got something?
Yeah, I was just going to say the last time I was on this show, I brought up how the left is egalitarian even in their view of the family unit and the community, and not even to mention the division of labor for our Austrian friends out there. Without hierarchy, without division, there is no division of labor. Without hierarchy inside the home, there is no family unit. And this is a goal of a lot of the social leftists now. They want to crush the family unit because they want everybody to be under the same rules, and it legally and culturally. And this is something that is incredibly dangerous. And not only is it anti-community, it's anti-prosperity, whatever you want to call it. That's why I say that the left is, that's the number one reason why the left is so dangerous.
Right. Well, they come full swing for the family, and that's where, Taylor, you did say the last time you were on the show, is that the downfall of the LPMC is that they don't specifically say that they're particularly right wing in this instance, and that is kind of a big deal. And especially for me personally, as I kind of laid out more towards the beginning of the show, I consider myself a more socially conservative person, and people cringe at that. But as I learn more and more, and as I think more and more about the issues that plague our society, is that it's the lack of that, where if you just have this degeneracy rampant, where it's free love, and well, they're not violating the NAP, but they're feeling up, you got a 40-year-old feeling up an 18-year-old, well, it's consensual, and there's single moms everywhere. It's at some point you realize that this is not good for your community as a whole, and you're going to need some kind of order to bring in this chaos, which will typically be an overbearing government that will crush the overall freedom that you have in your society.
What did Hoppe say? Left libertarians or Viagra for the state?
No, that was that was Peter Brimlow.
That was Peter Brimlow?
That was Peter Brimlow's quote, the Viagra of the state, speaking about immigration. Yeah. And Hoppe essentially used his quote to apply to left libertarian social theory, to say that left libertarianism itself is Viagra of the state.
And it works even on another level because they're blue pilled.
And pray for Peter Brimlow if you can. He had knee replacement surgery recently, and he's not healing up very fast.
Damn, that sucks.
So I guess what would be some kind of the literature that you guys read that really convinced you that this was the way? I guess we'll start with Pete. I know you guys are huge fans of Hoppe, but like, what in particular?
Well, I mean, the one person who keeps me coming back to libertarianism is Hoppe. If I read anything now of libertarian literature, it's going to be something that Hoppe wrote. I'm going to pull something off the shelf from Hoppe. Or some 90s Rothbard or something like that. I mean, I've read all the theory. I've read For a New Liberty. I read For a New Liberty twice when I became a libertarian. So all that. But after that, I mean, getting into NRX and starting to read Burnham, James Burnham, starting to read Sam Francis, then getting into some of the classics, reading Pareto, reading the Juvenile, and and Paul Gottfried. But people forget Paul Gottfried. Paul Gottfried he's 80 years old now, and he is as sharp as ever. And he's basically like the save. If libertarianism is going to really be a thing to behold one day, it's going to be people reading Paul Gottfried and applying it and finding a way, applying it to their libertarianism, because libertarianism cannot be left-wing and succeed, because all it will do is lead to chaos.
lead to degeneracy and chaos. And that's what I see in a lot of these people who are focused on sex work and drugs, and people like Adam Kokesh who just think, well, I can have, 6 girlfriends out here and smoke weed in Gardenia and, lift in the desert, and eventually Ancapistan's going to come. Well, you guys don't have proper respect for, your individual relationship. So if it's just, a borders free love for everybody, I don't think that's a good idea or going to lead to any kind of prosperous outcome or sustainable liberty. That's kind of always been my stance, and people are free to disagree with that. But I think people who have respect for natural hierarchy or families, strong fathers, strong mothers who respect their own individual roles, that's going to allow for people who can accept responsibility and tolerate the inherent responsibility that comes with freedom. Taylor.
Well, yeah, I mean, what got me here, The Economics and Ethics of Private Property by Hans Hoppe, Getting Libertarianism Right by Hans Hoppe, Egalitarianism as a Revolt Against Nature by Murray and Rothbard, Against the Left, Lou Rockwell, Leviathan and Its Enemies, Sam Francis, and let's see, there's definitely one more. Well, that's about all that comes to my mind right now. But really, Democracy, the God That Failed, obviously. But I tend to not mention that book because I want people to read something other than that from Hoppe, because people that are politically illiterate tend to take the wrong lesson from that book. By
You calling Moldbug illiterate?
To a point, whenever I have a lot of respect for Curtis, obviously, but he not even the wrong lesson. He essentially took what Hoppe did and extended it, which is actually fine. Like, I don't have a problem with that. Well, I mean, he's illiterate whenever he tries to define like libertarians half the time, but I mean, that's whatever. But people just say like, oh, I read Democracy, the God That Failed. Hoppe's a monarchist. Well, you didn't read the book. That's literally, I mean, and they'll just be like, well, I mean, I'm with him there, but like, anarcho-capitalism, whatever, like all I took out of it was that monarchy is better than democracy. I'm just like, okay, you didn't read the book that well. You didn't really take the lessons that you needed to, or at least consider them as much as you needed to. Also, best Hoppe book ever is A Theory of Socialism and Capitalism. That is, Stephan Kinsella and I agree that is the best Hoppe book. I'm probably one out of the however many Hoppians in the world would say that that's the best Hoppe book, but it definitely is. Kyle, I think you'd like that just because I don't know how much econ you've read, and I'm sure you've heard a lot about Hoppe that isn't great from people that hate him because they're dumb.
No, believe me, I do not take a lot of LP people seriously, other than the ones I know I can take seriously.
It's not dumb, it's evil.
Yeah,
it's not even dumb. Yeah. They're evil.
Yeah, and but if you read A Theory of Socialism and Capitalism and think that Hoppe is a bad libertarian or doesn't know what he's talking about, then you're a lost cause, and you should just drop out of politics or theory forever, because that's insane.
No, I really enjoyed the 2 episodes Pete and you did together on I can't remember what it was off the top of my head that you guys
realistic libertarianism, which is one of the first sections in Getting Libertarianism Right, which if we're talking about literature, if there's anybody that that is on the right that you think could be pushed in the right direction, quite literally, like more rightward towards anarcho-capitalism, then that's the book to give them. And it's short and it's great and uncomfortable at times, but the book to give every single one of your right-wing friends who makes fun of you for being a libertarian because they don't get it. Not yet, at least. Right.
And I feel like a lot of libertarians, specifically ones of the LP, are responsible for why libertarianism looks like such a fucking joke, is because they've made a joke out of it.
And the Cato Institute as well.
Yeah. it's kind of funny because when I first kind of came into the LP specifically and knew of libertarianism, I was listening to Larry Sharp, Stefan Molyneux, Eric July, and then eventually Spike Cohen, Dave Smith. Those were kind of the guys that I first heard of when I heard about libertarianism years ago. And when they kept talking about left libertarians, I'm like, what the fuck are you talking about? So, and then obviously 2 years later, after going to 2 LP conventions, I'm like, oh, yeah, I get it.
There they are.
Yeah, Buck, some of the literature that you've read that kind of got you to where you are, really inspired you to kind of think the way you think now.
I didn't even think you were going to word it in that way. These guys named a lot of good stuff. I like Paul Gottfried. I'm glad that that Pete said his book Multiculturalism and the Politics of Guilt is really good. Early on, I mean, this is kind of off the radar, I suppose, but there's a book called The South Was Right by the Kennedy brothers that I read when I was about 18 that kind of got me into talk of secession, and that put that spark in my mind early on. Sam Francis, man, you guys have nailed a lot of them. Leviathan and Its Enemies.
Beautiful Losers, too, if you can find
Beautiful
a
Losers, Shots Fired. All of Paul Gottfried's book are quite well written, honestly. And I really like, it wasn't mentioned, is The Betrayal of the American Right by Rothbard, and then Reclaiming the American, where is
Justin
it?
Raimondo.
Yeah, Reclaiming the American Right by Raimondo.
R.I.P.
That book that Pete and I went through a little bit the other day, the Samuel Francis covering James Burnham stuff is really cool. And of course, I like, it was touched upon, I like Moldbug stuff. Those are all, you know, Against the Left and Getting Libertarianism Right by the first one from Lou Rockwell, the second one from Hoppe.
Cool. Well, I'm definitely going to have to make sure I listen to this show a couple times over to make sure I kind of let everything sink in. So we're going to start to wrap here. I want to kind of get everybody's, and I know this is going to be difficult, but everybody's most bullish case for the LP. I know it's going to be a struggle, but and then I also want you guys' kind of elevator pitch for someone who's potentially kind of like me, where we're kind of looking at things and a little unsure of where to go. So, Buck, I'll start with you. What would be your most bullish case for the LP? And then after everyone does their round, then we'll go back and do, what if you're on the fence and you want to push them more towards, paleo or other route, what would you say to them?
This is going to sound terrible to start with, but
Sure.
the two terms that have always confused me when you're talking about markets is bull and bear. Is bull a good one?
Yeah.
Bullish. Okay, a good term, a good take on the LP. I don't really have one. I suppose I let's say this: if you're in some county that is, let's say, asexual politically, and the Democrats are kind of whatever, not much power, Republicans maybe not much power, everyone's kind of asexual basically, and the Libertarian Party could somehow help you get elected to a county commission seat or something like that, I suppose there's a case for it in that circumstance. And other than that, I don't have any good case for the Libertarian Party to exist. I would say, again, I think it's you're allocating valuable resources to a wasted effort. And if someone's on the fence and they're thinking about some of the stuff that we've been talking about and maybe wondering why I just said what I said, I would say if you want change through politics, you have to play the game as it's laid out. I can all day bitch about the two-party system and try to pretend that I'm outside of it, but that's what it is. It is what it is. We live in a two-party system. And so if you want to affect change politically, that's the game you have to play. If the Raiders draft a guy that wants to only play baseball and yet he's on a football team, it's not going to do much good. And so it'd be, ridiculous. I would say so. I would say this all goes back to local level stuff more importantly than even state to an extent, although we saw at least governorships can be quite important. And quit trying to base your entire life and your identity on political ideology, for one thing, would be one of my first pieces of advice. Get outside of that, live your life, and when it comes to politics, you got to do what you got to do, and being in a third party is essentially pointless, in my opinion.
Yeah, I completely understand where you're coming from. And that's kind of been the goal of the show, is to make anybody who's politically inclined a little bit healthier and a little bit better than they were. And to kind of perhaps lay out my position a little bit better when it comes to the LP, I feel like all across the country, you would probably be better served as a libertarian to run with the GOP. In Pennsylvania, once again, as it stands right now in 2022, looks good. I will change my mind the moment that does not seem to be the case. And I've said that multiple times over and over again. If the LP does not do what, we want it to do within the next couple of years, then no longer a registered libertarian, right? I'll be GOP in a heartbeat if that has to be the way it has to be. Once again, very open to being wrong.
I have a question real quick, Kyle, because I hear that a lot. And I think from different people, it means different things. What is the goal of the Libertarian Party when you say we want it to do, if it does what we want it to do in the next couple of, what is it?
So get people elected locally to enable the people who elected them to have more freedom in their locale. And whenever there's, like mandates or gun laws that are passed down in Pennsylvania, then, you don't have to enforce those. And I think you and I may have talked about this once, in a different show, but I get so frustrated with libertarians who say all police are bad people. Well, if you're friends with your local sheriff and you're a libertarian and you can convince him not to enforce gun laws, is that cop really a bad person, or are you just a fucking autistic libertarian? That is one of the most frustrating things in the world to me, when it goes to this binary of all police are bad people. Well, the police who didn't enforce gun laws or who didn't enforce lockdowns, like, once again, to bring it back to Ian Smith, the cop said, well, you guys are all in violation of federal law. That being said, have a good day. You want to call that dude a bad person? Go fuck yourself. All right. Don't care. I'm not going to, just say that fuck all cops because I'm a libertarian. No, these people can decide whether or not I go to jail and whether or not I can leave my fucking house. I'm going to be friendly with those people. I don't care if that doesn't make me a libertarian. If it doesn't, okay, whatever. I have freedom. You don't. You're principled. I'm free. What do you want to be? So Taylor, most bullish case for the LP, and what you would say to change people's mind.
Most bullish case for the LP would be, like I said earlier, work with the right. Stop pretending that the right is your enemy. Now, half of the party got to go then.
More.
75 to 80% of the party got to go then. And that's fine. Parties experience real purges of ideological enemies within it. And that's okay. What the LPMC wants to do with taking over the party, okay. But stop saying that you're neither left nor right. Work with the right. Stop pretending like you're better than everybody because you've read more philosophy. Work with these people, make a better future. You can. You're smart enough. You can work with people who maybe aren't as well read and convince them, but stop talking down on them. You will make a better future, even locally, if you just stop talking like a pie in the sky. I'm the most well-read, smartest person in the room because I read a couple Rothbard books, and start getting engaged in your community with right-wingers who are well-intentioned that might need a little guidance. And whenever you act adversarially to them, automatically, they will write you off and they will hate you forever. And they will hate libertarians because you are the image of the libertarian to them. And you wasted potential power and you wasted potential allies. So TLDR version, start working with the right. Stop pretending you're not left nor right. Walter Block was wrong. It's fine. He's wrong on a lot. I love him, but he was wrong on a lot. And elevator pitch for someone to join the GOP. Do you care about the future? Do you care about your family? Do you want more war? Do you want more monetary debasement? then don't leave and stay in the LP and don't go GOP and don't change at least your local situation. You talked about how a sheriff can change a community that fast. The LP ain't changing the sheriff. Join the GOP, start coming to meetings, start talking to people in your community. Business owners, not too many Democrats. Start working with people who have skin in the game. And if you come at them as a right-wing politician that just wants them to make more money and to be left alone from, say in our situation, say you want to make Pittsburgh a better city because you don't want it to be don't want the people out of Harrisburg using Pittsburgh as just another place to steal from, or start working with your local GOP. You're not going to love it at all times. There are going to be some people who say some things that you don't like. Work with them. And if they're bad actors, get the power to punish them. But work with the good ones, get rid of the bad ones.
There's going to be people in the LP that are going to say things you don't like. So just
Absolutely.
deal with it,
Right.
Yeah. Okay, Pete, same question as you. Bullish case for the LP and your elevator pitch for people to move past the LP.
Okay, so if the LP actually, I'm envisioning this scenario where they would actually become important in the future. They have to become the Bitcoin party.
Oh.
And because I think, just look at monetary inflation, look at all of this. And if they became the Bitcoin party and they became the party of alternative currencies and just concentrated on that, I think that it could be like the kind of thing you see in Europe where, like you had in Iceland, you had the pirate party and all they were about was digital freedom and stuff and then they started getting people seated, things like that. I think that would be something that the LP could actually do. And you could actually see some, but I think people just, if you're not one of those two parties, we're in a two-party system, deal with it. If you're not going to be in one of those two parties and you want to do something else, then you have to become more like a lobby group. And you have to concentrate on like one thing. And I think if the LP became the Bitcoin party, they would be, there's the possibility that they could be a force. And they could really change things. They could swing elections. They could really start negotiating to get things changed. They're not going to do that. So you're going to have to work with the GOP. And this is what I try to make this real simple. Okay. Most libertarians I know, and even ones that don't have them, understand that guns are important. Which party wants to take away your guns and which party wants you to have guns? Simple. Why would you be anywhere near, if you're going to abandon the LP but you don't want to work with the GOP, just realize the GOP is the one that is pro-gun. I don't know. Maybe the reason why you didn't have people being welded into buildings here is because we have guns. I mean,
yeah.
I would say that's it. Realize you have to understand the LP is not going to win unless they do something radical, like I said, and then decide to go with the side that is closest to your values. Or just drop out completely. I mean, I have a hard time. I understand why people would want to do that. I encourage them not to, but I have a hard time. I have a hard time criticizing them unless they want everyone else to drop out too. So when people tell me they're going to drop out, I tell them, go ahead. Just know politics isn't going away, but God bless. But when I say, well, I'm not going to drop out, but I'm going to do this, then a lot of the people who say you want to drop out, who are called agorists, they immediately want to start attacking you because they have a leftist kind of mentality of everything that they don't like is immoral. And so that's my pitch.
Yeah, no, very yeah, I think for people who are on the fence, that there's definitely a lot to pick up there, and it's it's true. Once again, who wants to take away your guns? And there are a lot of libertarians who just aren't fascinating people. They go to their LP meeting and they're super stoked to be the chair of their county, and as soon as they're thrown out of it, then well, it's all hell breaks loose. It's like, well, okay, well, what value do you actually add to your community? And are you somebody that anybody would even remotely consider voting for? Probably not.
Right.
To kind of tail on to what Taylor was saying about businesses earlier, my bass player in my band owns an automotive shop, owns a bar. My dad owns an automotive shop. They're dying-the-wool Republicans. Love both the guys dearly, but that's where they're at. And if you came up to them as a Democrat, they would write you off completely. They're definitely more open to libertarians, but
they see the degeneracy that some libertarians are promoting, and they're completely turned off, and they assume that that's all of them.
Right. But they also think a lot of those people would call themselves libertarians. They'd be like, yeah, I'm a Republican, but I'm probably more libertarian leaning, because they heard like Ron Paul or Gary Johnson in 2016 or 2012. And they say, yeah, I like the low taxes. I like the lower regulations, but I also care about winning.
Yeah.
And if you can convince enough of these people that working with libertarians as members of the GOP, like a lot of people in the GOP think libertarians are incredibly intelligent people, the good ones. Like Tom Woods, great example. A lot of his listener base are probably not ANCAPs.
No, right. A lot of Republicans, a lot of conservatives.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And they think that like, okay, this theory stuff is cool, but a lot of these libertarians are useless people politically. Yeah. And they like to learn, but they also like to win, and they like to protect their children's futures. And until people in the LP learn this, they're going to continue to be useless. People care about the future. People care about just prosperity for their children. Right. They don't care about ideological consistency. They want to win, and they want their grandchildren especially to be able to live in a similar world than they did, or at least especially a better one.
Yeah. Buck, you look like you had something to kind of add there a little bit earlier.
I was just thinking about the actual, if you just look at end results and power structures in a game of politics, no matter what your platform is that you run on, if you siphon votes away from someone that's good and someone bad wins, you are essentially pro that bad person. So in other words, had DeSantis lost against what Pete lovingly called the gay black crackhead, then if that LP candidate, which I don't know who it was, if that LP candidate would have pulled enough votes, I think it was like 13,000 is what DeSantis won by, something like that. Yeah. If that LP candidate pulled those votes from DeSantis, then essentially when it comes down to it, in the end of the actual results that happen, the LP candidate is pro lockdown and anti-freedom at that point, because that's what you've caused.
Yeah, it's an ugly truth for libertarians to accept, but sometimes I think that is the exact situation that you shouldn't run against good libertarians. And I think to give credit to Dave Smith, he's always said we shouldn't run somebody against Ron DeSantis because he was so good on lockdowns. Actually, one more question before we leave, and then we'll do plugs and get out of here. When it comes to national politics, we're hearing about Dave Smith running 2024. What do you guys think about that? Buck, we could start with you. And I'm not here to ask you guys to smear him, obviously, but the idea seems to be to, as everyone would say, reignite the Ron Paul revolution. What are you guys' ideas around that?
I wish he would run as a Republican, because I would love to see him on the Republican debate stage. And speaking of reigniting the Ron Paul revolution, well, that's exactly what the Ron Paul revolution was Ron Paul on the Republican debate stage. And I believe that the case is that Dave happened to see the moment between Giuliani and Ron Paul, and that's gave us the great Dave Smith as we know him today. And so I think that Dave Smith is too good for the Libertarian Party, in my personal opinion. I think that he should run as a Republican, and that would be amazing. Again, I know I said earlier, if you run and your point is not to win, that's a bit odd. However, on a giant scale like the Republican Party, even if I didn't think Dave could win, who knows? Honestly, I wouldn't have thought Donald Trump could have won. So this is anyone's guess at this point, but I would love to see Dave do that. And I think because he's brilliant, and he's very good and articulate at saying the things that we liked to hear people say. And that would be awesome. And I think representing the LP will do nothing for him. He's already on Joe Rogan. He's already on Tim Cast. He's already on Kennedy. I suspect at some point he could be on Tucker Carlson. I don't know, but the LP label certainly won't get him on Tucker Carlson. And so I just think it would do more harm than good for him personally, but that's of course up to him.
Sure. Taylor?
Well, I would love for Dave to not waste his potential as a potential elective representative. The last thing I would ever want is for Dave to get the LP presidential nomination and for me to advocate against him. I've been a longtime listener, a longtime supporter. I've met him. I've talked to him. He's a great guy. Probably doesn't remember me, and that's fine. But the last thing I would ever want is to tell my friends who are like, hey, this LP guy seems pretty cool. Like, I would vote for him, but there's no way that I could vote for somebody in the LP because it's a waste of my vote. For me to have to tell somebody that somebody as great as him and as charismatic as him and as well-read as him is a waste of time would hurt me, but I would do it. And that would suck. And like Buck said, Dave Smith on a Republican debate stage is far more dangerous than Dave Smith as an LP presidential nominee off a debate stage. By his own case, the Ron Paul Giuliani moment. If Ron Paul's in the LP, he's not on that stage.
Yep.
Dave?
I'm just going to repeat everything. Yeah, Dave runs as a Republican. But here's one thing that I don't think people take into consideration if he's up on that stage, and especially if Trump is up on that stage. When Trump starts with his bullshit, Dave is quick enough to be able to go at him.
Yeah.
And that will draw attention. That will draw attention to him. That will be like, people will be like, who the fuck is this guy? Let me look more into him. That would definitely be something that, I mean, DeSantis is stiff. I don't know if people realize that DeSantis is very stiff.
Yeah.
I don't see him going up on stage and doing very well against Trump unless before they have a thing set up that you're going to be my Trump's telling him you're going to be my VP.
Yeah, DeSantis isn't for the to the jugular kind of guy, right?
Yeah.
He's very defensive, but he's not going to be good at going on the offensive, as to where Trump is very, very good at, once again, going straight for the jugular and just ripping people apart. Sorry to interrupt you, but yeah, go ahead, Pete.
No, and I think that would be, if Dave Smith wants to run for president, then how did Ron Paul do it? Ron Paul ran in 1988 for president in LP. I mean, besides a Morton Downey Jr. appearance, I mean, literally nobody really has anything to hold out to show for that. I think he was the first to get over 1 million votes, and that's cool and everything. But also it was, CIA guy against the friggin' Mighty Mouse in friggin' Massachusetts. But yeah, I mean, Ron was able to make an impact because he ran as a Republican. If he had ran as a libertarian, nobody would have paid attention to him. So if you're going to have some kind of impact, and, who knows what, it's such a weird time. Who knows what could happen if you're on the big stage? But, I mean, if they're not going to let him on the stage, when it comes down to the Republican and Democrat debate, there's not going to be a third person. It's just going to be a Republican and a Democrat. So get up on the main stage. You're going to be up there with a bunch of people, but you can definitely make a difference. Otherwise, I mean, I don't know. I mean, you want to talk about, everybody wants to talk about restarting the Ron Paul revolution. How about just copying what he did?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a very, very fair critique. I definitely got a lot to kind of think about. And I think everybody who listens to this is going to have a lot to think about. You guys laid out a very, very great critique. And obviously I agree with you guys on, I really don't know if there's anything I really disagreed about. This is still something that I think about a lot in my own head, and just because there's a lot of great people here in Pennsylvania, but maybe you guys are right in that we are allocating resources poorly, but time will tell, and I'll be the first one to admit when I'm wrong. So guys, you want to give plugs and get out of here?
Sure. Me first. I keep going first. But the show's called Counterflow with Buck Johnson. It's at counterflowpodcast.com. Follow me on Twitter at Buck Rebel, BuckRebel.
Cool shit. Taylor?
Hopbean.org is back, baby. We are back online. We will be publishing articles weekly. We have a big backlog from a lot of people that I'm looking forward to publishing. And I'm looking forward to writing some more myself, and looking forward to putting forward some more material, not just in forms of articles, but in terms of blogs and maybe some short videos that we've been discussing. So hopbean.org, keep a lookout. Twitter, T_Shiring, SHIRING.
Cool. Pete?
The Pete Quinones show, that one's pretty easy. My Substack is By Any Means Necessary. It's petequinones.substack.com. And you can find me on Twitter if you look for the Pete Quinones show. It's at Mance Raymond. And that's an inside joke for anyone who's been following me for a very long time.
Throwback, baby.
All right. Good stuff, guys. And until next time, everybody, take care.